Hi, good afternoon, Dileep.
Good afternoon, Adrian.
Good to see you again. You're becoming a regular on the podcast here with your second session now.
Thank you very much for having me back. Yeah, excited to be here. So thanks again.
No problem, no problem. We're obviously going to do a bit of a deviation from the normal culture corner, culture and performance conversations, and now take a look at really how tech leaders are moving away from AI hype into, I suppose, practical adoption within engineering teams. And you're the man with your background to guide us through this topic.
Oh yeah, that's big words to live up to, Adrian. So yeah, there's
Well,
always big words coming from you. So thank you very much.
No, you're all right. No problem. But I think just before we kick off, if you give the listeners an overview of, what you're currently doing,
Sure.
that'd be great.
Sure. So my name's Dileep Marway. I'm VP of Engineering for PebblePad. So PebblePad is a edtech SaaS platform that provides a reflective learning experience for students. Also, at the same time, essentially it can be used by lecturers. Essentially, it's a really powerful platform. I've been there a year now, Adrian, and yeah, I've worked with some great people. I've learned loads, and yeah, my first time in sort of the educational sector. So yeah, really enjoying it.
Good. Very good. Very good. Well, to kick things off, I know, as we said, AI hype. There's everywhere you turn, there's conversation around AI. There's a lot of information out there, probably a lot of misinformation out there as well. So, what are leaders currently really doing with AI?
So I think there's probably a sliding scale because everyone's at a different part in their journey, and there's nothing essentially wrong with that. I think from my own perspective, being at PebblePad for a year, I think what's been really important is just reflecting with any sort of tool, whether that be AI or anything else. It's really important to just ask yourself, what's the actual problem that I'm looking to solve? And it's a bit like making any changes to anything. The first thing you need to do is say, I'm making these changes. How do I actually know that that change has made any impact? So having those initial sort of data points to measure, having the right boundaries is super important. And then when you implement a change like AI or could be something else, you can see what actually happens to those data points. And what's really important is not just to get lost in those data points, but actually ask, are my customers actually getting what they want? Are my customers any happier? Am I selling more of my products? Or am I getting more support tickets or complaints? So I think that's really, really important. It's a bit like if you think of like a factory and you're installing a new machine. It's not really as easy as just putting that machine there and then thinking everyone's going to use it. What you have to look at things like safety. You have to look at how does it actually incorporate the processes already there? Do we have enough people who can use the machines, or are the machines going to meet our quality standards? I think it's really important to take that step back, which is why I think a lot of leaders are probably on different phases of that curve at the moment, because you can't short circuit that curve to actually say, I'm going to be the best. There's a whole load of work that has to go in to get to that point first.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think I like what you said there, basically saying, what are we going to use AI for?
Yes.
Because I've heard some horror stories where like a C-suite just goes, we need to implement AI, technology directors saying, well, we should be looking at what are we going to use it
Correct.
to improve the business rather than a blanket. We just need to use AI.
Yes, 100%. And what one of the sort of points that I always make is, if you've got other problems in a team, whether that be cultural or whether that be procedural or whether that be training or whether that be communication, throwing AI on top of that problem will probably just make the problem worse. So it's really important to keep reflecting to actually say, what problem are we solving? Do we actually have other problems that we have to solve first? And that may not be solved by AI.
Do you think some people think we need to use AI for X, where really they just need to automate the process?
Really good question. I think for me, it's coming back to that first point, which is understanding the problem that you want to solve. Relate
Yeah.
that to your business priorities. So, will that retain customers? Will it get me any new customers? And then I think it's more so that fact that AI may give you sort of that brainstorming piece at the start to actually say, what type of things can I do to solve the problem? Now, automation may be one of those, but ultimately it might actually be that AI says, do this manual check, and the manual check is quicker than actually doing the automation. But then once you get the confidence from doing that manual piece and you go back to AI and say, this is the data that I've got, then the next step is you've got the confidence to then say, let's now automate.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. I suppose from a novice's point of view,
Yes.
thinking about AI, you're thinking about improved productivity, I suppose, improved value.
Yes.
From engineering perspective, where are you seeing AI add the most value currently?
I think for me personally, it's that whole SDLC, but it's getting people to think outside the box a bit more. Because what it's giving people time to now do is actually spend more time in the initiation phases, which is thinking more about the problem that they want to solve. Whereas I think before, what people were probably doing is just jumping into the coding part.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're doing now is you're finding I'm saving some time in my coding, but it's also giving me an idea on where to start. So normally the hardest thing to do is actually, how do I do this? What do I start with? By using AI, it's giving ideas. You're well within your right to either accept them or reject them, and then you can go from there. So I think in terms of giving templates and starting bases, really helpful. One example that I've been using, I remember last week I had to compare about 7 different spreadsheets, and I was doing like a risk audit, and it would have taken me days. So the first thing I did is I actually started with Claude. I said to Claude Code, I need a bit of help here. How would you compare these? And it gave me a really good measure to actually say, this is what I've got so far. But I cross-checked it to say, give me the stuff that you're 100% confident about and tell me why you're 100% confident. So I cross-checked everyone. Then I actually said, which ones aren't you sure about? And then I did that manually. And then I went through which ones can you not work out? And then I left that to myself, but it saved me time. And it gave me a way to think that was really, really important. I think in terms of other areas, it's definitely helping in unit testing, really good for debugging. I think the agentic AI piece is really, really interesting because what you've actually got is you've got agents who are now creating parts of the SDLC. But what that can do to an engineer is engineers who are really good at thinking, really good at critiquing, really good at architecting, are now really worth their weight in gold, right? So I think it's allowed a different approach there. I know the key thing for me is focusing on AI in terms of seeing it as a bigger picture. Because if you just throw AI at something and say, I expect it to be this, you need to hone it in. You need to give it the context. You need to give it some knowledge. And you need to give it the boundaries. It's a bit like if you had a Formula One car that you said is fast, and I just want it to go even faster.
Yeah.
The advantage of going faster actually comes from a lot of components. It comes from the driver. It comes from the pit crew. It comes from the diagnostics. It comes from the changes that we've made. So I think for me, the companies and teams that are seeing the most value around AI right now is generally coming from those who actually are experimenting more. They're trying AI and they're being open and honest to say, AI is really good for this, but our team is actually better at this.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's from an outside perspective, is Claude Code the way to go? Is that where most people are going?
It's a difficult one, Adrian. I think there's a lot of really, really good tools out there. I think it's more so what works for your team. What works from a cost perspective, what allows you to give the models that work for you. So I think it's a hard one because I think the tools are moving at such a pace. What would be difficult for a company is you've got multiple tools, multiple models. You're managing the security for all of them. You're managing the amount of tokens for each of them. So I think it depends on what a team can look after and the boundaries they can actually put in place. Personally, I think it'd be quite difficult to have lots and lots.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Obviously, AI is not just impacting engineering teams, that sort of stuff. It's across software delivery. I know you've mentioned that
Yes.
in the past. What are you seeing as practical examples as how AI is impacting on software delivery in a positive manner?
I think for me, personally, I'm definitely seeing more output. I'm seeing more value being delivered through teams. At the same time, I think you're seeing more startups. You're seeing people with more product ideas actually coming out. So if you do a search and say how many companies have been registered with Companies House, you're essentially seeing lots more people now coming with ideas, because what this allows you to do is actually do prototypes quicker, experiment more. And that's really interesting, right? So I think from my perspective, it allows teams who had that blocker, which was, I'm not sure where to start. This gives a template.
Yeah.
Although what I think it is now doing is basically people are seeing that the AI models essentially are using data that they've been trained on. So people can have similar outputs. What that is now forcing is, I think people are becoming more competitive because they're being more creative to try and go around it. So to stand out, they're probably using AI as a measure, but then they're using their own creative juices to adapt and learn and add. And that's really exciting for the industry, I'd say.
Yeah, I was going to say that's got to be good for us all if it's increasing creative thinking from people just to improve and to get ahead.
Correct.
One of the things that you mentioned before, and I wanted to go back to, is you mentioned very briefly about testing.
Yeah.
He said it's had an impact on testing. So what are we seeing AI help with testing and quality assurance?
So I think the first thing for me is, if you're speeding up the start of your software development lifecycle, what you're essentially doing is more work's going out, but you still need to test more work. So I think from that perspective, what AI allows you to do is actually see, where are my bottlenecks? Where do I need to be better? I think from a testing perspective, I think it's been great for things like test case planning, so creating test scripts, or can you help me write a test plan, and you start with a basis and you add to it. It's been brilliant. Automation testing, there's some great tools out there at the moment which actually allow you to say, this is my website, and can you actually create me some automated scripts that actually help you to go through? That's brilliant, right?
Wow.
At the same time, unit testing.
Yeah.
So I think from a testing perspective, it's been a massive win. Although I think what it has brought out is the importance of still thinking outside the box. Because what AI will do, it's trained on models. And there may be certain paths that only a person has context for. Now, models are getting smarter by the day, by the minute. So they may get closer to what a tester would do anyway. But at the moment, I do feel that there is still value in having somebody who thinks outside the box and actually gives some independence to what they're testing.
So that's your competitive advantage, really, having somebody, a human, having that outside the box thinking, creativity.
Yes.
And do you still need a tester and a human to work with the AI when it's doing its test?
So I think for me, when you're using agentic AI, you still need somebody who basically can. It's a bit like having a team. You wouldn't have a team of one person and no one else in the team and release everything. Even if you had a team, you basically want two people that compare with each other, challenge each other. Is there a better way of doing this? Why haven't you done it this way? And I think agentic AI is exactly the same, Adrian, in terms of if you did use an agent for testing, you still want someone to oversee. You still want someone who can look at the output. You still want someone who can think, we've tested this, but what about this? And I think it's that business context that's really, 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 really hard to know. A good example is I was reading something the other day where someone said that they asked for a biography of a person, and the AI tool basically wrote the biography, and they basically said that they wrote a book in, I think it was 2025, and they said, but the person died in 2022. And what AI wasn't smart enough to work out was essentially it was two people that it mixed up, but it didn't have the context to actually know that if somebody's not there, they're not going to be able to write that book personally. So it's that context and actually challenging AI that's really, really important. So I feel it's a really good basis, but if it's stopping people thinking, any tool that stops people thinking, you're using it in the wrong way.
Yeah, it's not the silver bullet to get rid of people. It's
correct.
It's the product.
Correct.
Productivity,
correct.
And value add.
Yes.
That makes sense because it's got. I was going to say for anyone who's listening, that's not really sure about AI, but that's almost impossible nowadays. There is a big problem with sort of hallucination and misinformation, isn't it?
Correct. And I think the casing point here is if you ask the same question a few times, you're going to get a different answer because what it's doing is comparing the words. And it's trailing through to try a bit like a neural network. It's essentially comparing the two and then it's giving answers. Definitely has value. But like any tool, the value comes from a context of a person. It's a bit like a driverless car.
Yeah.
And what they've found is a person sits there and they still need their foot on the brake or they still need to steer the steering because there's certain contexts that they'll never know, right? What if somebody kicks a football in front of the car, for instance? Like, has it been trained on that model? Does it ever know that situation could occur? Or what if somebody basically falls over? Like, how does it deal with that? So I think it's an important analogy to use that there's always context around something.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to there not being a silver bullet, what mistakes are you organizations make on AI?
I think for me, it's probably maybe just throwing it in and saying to a team, just use it, and then expecting everything to be fixed, right? So let's say if I look at us personally and how we've done it, we've had to train, we've had to have community of practice sessions, we've got a great team who drive this, including my engineering managers. And without going through that training, without going through that learning, without meeting weekly and cross-collaborating between people, it would have been one of those where I expected success, but you have to go through that curve. So I think a lot of the time is expecting that silver bullet. This will just work, and it never works like that. I think what's really important is firstly understand the problem you're looking to solve. Trial it yourself, give it a go yourself, and keep learning. And don't be scared to course correct. It may just be quicker. You might actually have the context. If you've been working on something for 4 years and you've done 15 different projects of the same thing, you've probably got far more context than the tool in itself.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose this might track back to your early comments about you mentioned data points quite frequently.
Yes.
Looking at that, how do businesses know that AI is working, or they're getting their ROI on AI?
Really good point, because essentially you've probably seen, Adrian, everyone worried about tokens, everyone worried about costs right now.
Yeah.
Companies saying they're stopping spending because they've used all their token cost in the month that they had for a year. So absolutely crazy, right? When you think about it. I think what's really important is with anything, it's to start with a measure and then overlay a tool, and then you can see changes to those data points. So what matters generally to teams? For myself, it's been that delivery output. We know what the value is. We know what customers want. So we deliver how much of that we're implementing pre-AI. So we might want to get story points. And then we track the story points after putting AI in place, and we see where we are. We then track things like throughput. We track things like cycle time. We look at quality. So how many bugs are we getting? How many support tickets are we getting? Really important. And essentially, you look at things like how much rework are we doing? How many tokens are we using at the same time? What's the cost versus benefit? And I think that's really important, because I think if you're not tracking something, it could just be a false economy where it's somebody's view that this is great, I'm faster. But when you actually look at the data, it paints something completely different, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you're basically overlaying pre-AI data,
Correct.
post-AI data to actually have quality data about where things are improving, where they might not be, to make sure it's of the benefit.
Yes.
Brilliant. That's a really good way to track it. Is a bit of a curveball here. How safe is AI? And the reason I ask this is because did Meta not have to admit to their AI tool got into a competitor's network or system? Now that's a real novice's explanation to that, but you know what I mean.
I think for me, I think the speed of change that's going on right now, I actually think your sort of security officers and your security experts are super important. The main reason being, when you've got a tool like this, risk, governance, performance, security, accessibility, quality, super important, because what you're doing is things should be checked. So I think for me, it's if you have the right people involved in the right roles, you can mitigate the risk. But if you think that everything that is output is perfect, then you're kind of a risk to yourself, right? So the key thing that I always say is read everything. You don't have to use it. You can put it in the bin if you want. But essentially, you can use it as a good basis and you can add to it. But if it gets your creative juices going, then that's a good thing. What I would say, though, is always get things checked through security. It's just like any tool.
Yeah. So that's your big risk, really.
Correct.
And even more risk if you're naive to that.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for that, Dileep. Just you touching on something you mentioned before around productivity.
Yes.
Yeah, we were talking briefly on increased productivity. Are we actually seeing AI create increased productivity, or are we seeing it create bottlenecks and problems further down the line?
I definitely. So it creates a creativity. So it creates a creative aspect. But I do think if there's a problem there, it will find it quickly. So a good example of that is if you've sped up the development process, so we're getting more things developed. If you only have one tester, or if you don't have an agentic tester in your flow, everything's going to stack up, and then testing seen as a problem, right? Just like if you have nobody checking on architecture from a security perspective, if you're doing no security tests in your pipeline, the more stuff that you put out will probably show up security is a problem. So I actually think it does create bottlenecks, though the advantage that you have is you'll find them fast, and most likely you'll do something about it.
Right, okay. So while it creates a negativity or an issue, by highlighting it quicker, you can fix that problem quicker.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Anyone who's looked at an AI at the moment, certain things, is definitely getting some good tips here. So it's helpful. You touched on earlier as well about, you didn't use the word guardrails, but around guardrails. What sort of guardrails would you need to put in place if you're using AI?
I think the first one for me is use approved tools. And when I say approved tools, go through your security team, get the right supplier sign off. That's important, right? You can't just think someone else is using it, we're going to be fine. Maybe they didn't go through the guardrails that you should be going through, right? Second one I'd definitely say is keeping humans accountable. I think that's really important, because if you're not thinking, then there's going to be a lot of AI slop. There's probably going to be hallucinations at places. So I think not missing that part is really important. In terms of what you should definitely be doing, you should still be testing. I still believe that you still want to have measures, and you want to keep a governance log of what you are using AI for and what you're not using AI for. That's a really good audit piece.
Right. Okay.
That's important. And then I think the big thing for me is not just measuring speed as a data point, but measure your governance controls. So I mean things like quality. I mean things like how many incidents have we had? How performant is the system? Are we accessible to WCAG 2.2 AA compliant? So I think that's really, really important, that the guardrails are a necessity.
Yeah.
If you start without the guardrails, I think what you're doing there is you're invoking more business risk.
Okay. And who, from I suppose from an external perspective and naive perspective, as in me, who was responsible for putting those guardrails in place? Does that come from the C-suite? Does head of technology directors?
Good question. So generally, we, like, where I've worked in companies, we've had a standard process. So a new supplier has to be signed off by security person, needs to go through sysops, needs to go through IT. So I think it's a team's role for people to come at it from different angles. So what I'd normally say is, when you've got a tool that you want to implement, when you think about safety, a CTO will see safety in probably a bit more of a commercial view. A sort of engineering manager or head of engineering will probably see this at more of a code level. A person in product may see this at a customer level. A person in support may see this at a ticket level. And where that's really, really beneficial is bringing those minds together. You're de-risking from a company perspective.
Yeah. So it's a collaboration.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Just going back to something you mentioned before about hallucinations. Sorry, and that's obviously well publicized. How do you get buy-in within your teams to trust AI's output?
I think it's like any sort of change in a team. So for me, it's very much about taking the team on the journey, the team not feeling like you've just chucked this on them and say, you need to use it. But then also, I always say that there will be champions in the team, people who are passionate, people who want to drive it forwards. It's taking those people who are enablers and getting them to actually take people on the journey with them. And that's probably the best approach that I'd say, Adrian. It's making sure that you sell the value, you have data points and you show a difference, and you give people the opportunity to actually learn and scale with their use. That's really important.
I like that, because I have heard like horror stories, and you'll probably know more than me, where someone says, right, okay, we're going to implement code into our software engineering team. And some of the team are early adopters, they're on board with it. And others just don't want anything to do with it.
Yes.
And that must be really difficult.
I think one thing that works really well, though, is if you could pair up some of the adopters with people who are skeptical.
Right, yeah.
That's worked really well for us in terms of having people working together, getting to a common goal themselves. But I think a community of practice is really, really good, because what a community of practice does is something like we're doing a lunch and learn. Feel free to bring your lunch with you. We're going to be teaching this week. And then you pass that baton on to someone else. And it's just about learning.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Is that something you've adopted yourself?
I did a lot of this in the past, not so much around AI, but it could have been around things like getting engineers to test more. It could have been around our performance testing, our security approach, but I found that works really well. We do run a community of practice every week through some of my team. And that's worked really well, because what it allows people to do is say, this person's doing this and this is what they've learned. And that learning aspect is really important.
Yeah. It brings everyone on the journey and allows other people to get
Correct.
involved with learning and sharing their input, and they feel a part of it. So we're going back into the culture piece from last podcast.
Exactly. Good old days.
I know. Thinking about the evolving world that we're in tech, what sort of skills do you think that tech leaders and engineering leads, engineering managers now need in a world of AI moving forward?
It's a great question, Adrian. I'd say the skill set is probably still the same.
Right.
Maybe we got to a point where we were comfortable with other skills, but actually the skills that we needed were still those that we should have had, if that makes sense. I think AI is now showcasing that people who actually understand the product, people who actually understand their customer, are actually worth their weight in gold, because they can go to AI, they can use a agent to help them, and they can get to that solution quicker. But if we take a step back and we say AI didn't exist, that's really what we should have been doing before anyway, right? So maybe AI has given us some guardrails that the people who are actually more skilled and sort of the cream of the crop in that instance, they're coming to the surface there. So I think the skill set is still the same. I think people who are very good at reviewing things critically, that's a really important skill. At the same time, risk is now becoming super important, because what you've got is you're handing over the keys to an agent or an AI tool. And if you're not very good at understanding risk, or you're not very good at raising risk, first thing you're probably going to do is take a step back, get a cup of tea, and you're just going to leave it to that agent or AI, right? And that's a really bad problem. And the last one I'd definitely say is it's the old piece around communication. Because for me, even if an agent creates something, if you don't understand the value of what you're doing, why will it even matter to a customer? So I think the way that we communicate, whether it be written or verbal, is super, super important. And it's a bit one of those where having a really great problem solver in a team who can critique, who can course correct along the way, if they're AI next to them and they use the AI as their fuel, they're the ones who will actually be surging ahead on the journey.
Yeah. So use it to complement you.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Lots of learnings coming out of this, Dileep. Thank you very much. I'll not bend your ear for too much longer, but I do have a couple of other things to ask, and then poke around your experience. For anybody who's going to start out on their AI journey, what sort of hints and tips or advice would you have to these tech leaders starting out?
So I say, first thing is, I think don't be fearful of change, whether it be AI or whether it be anything in the industry. There's always change, right? So first thing I'd say to people is try it yourself. Maybe give it a go in your home environment. Like if you're cooking, try using AI. Like, I've got these vegetables in the fridge. What can I make? I'd probably still get that wrong, Adrian, but yeah, that's down to me, not AI. And I think just get confident with different use cases. And I think for me, start small. And if you find that if it's giving you more time to think, that's never a bad thing. If it's not giving you time to think, then maybe it's got a better use for something else. So trying to work out what works for you. Good example, I think, from the past few weeks was I was quite reluctant to use an AI tool to create my slides. So I thought, this is something that I always do, and I thought, not sure if I trust it, right? And I built up so many slides over probably 4 or 5 months, and now I've got enough of a data set to actually have the confidence to say it can't go wrong, because I've done it for 4 or 5 months and I've given so many permutations. Here, I'm going to pass it. And Claude Design did a great job. Saved me. Normally, it'd take me a couple of hours to put my slide together, and I wanted it perfect. But what Claude Design actually did is I passed all those slides in and I said, this is how I normally create a town hall. It took that town hall and then it put it in the format that I wanted it. It looked really pristine. It looked brilliant. There were a few tweaks I had to do, but those 3
Nice.
hours probably went down to half an hour, which worked really,
Wow.
really well.
Right. That is impressive. But you need the data set to train it on in order to get the results that you need. Yeah.
You need the right context, the right data. And also I think one of the things I've been learning recently is if you're adding in your own bias, that AI agent has basically become you again. So sometimes if you start again on a search, or you start a new AI agent and you only build in the context that you want it to have, that's a really powerful tool.
Right. Okay. Avoids the bias.
Correct.
Yeah. I never thought of that. You probably would train it it'd just be like hiring another Adrian, wouldn't it? Or
It was interesting. Somebody told me the other day that if their search term got bigger than a certain amount, they start a new one because they're actually worried that they might be adding in the bias themselves. So if they've got a really long search, that they want the actual view to be a certain way, but they may have changed a person from, say, if I wanted my AI to be a journalist, they might have turned the journalist into an editor, for instance, right? By all the questions or the bias that they're adding in. I think that's a really good mindset to have.
Yeah, exactly. Just be careful, obviously, how you use it. Yeah.
Correct.
And thinking about the future before we wrap up, and AI, it's not going away. It's going to get bigger, have a greater impact. How do you see AI changing engineering teams or impacting engineering teams over the next couple of years?
I think, like I said before, the first one, the best engineers, the ones who communicate the best problem solvers, the ones with the best ideas to actually alleviate a problem that a user may have or a customer may have, I still think those people will come to the fore. I think that was the case before, but maybe that competitive advantage now means that sort of level was here before, and maybe that level's there now. So people will improve. I think that's a great thing around the AI. Also, I think the agentic AI is a direction of travel. Super impressive and very exciting. But I think the people who can think of risk, or the people who can think of, you've done this, but you've not thought of this, or you haven't got this context, or you don't know that we tried this project 6 months ago and it failed. You're just going off all these companies where it works. So it's a bit like autopilot on an aircraft, Adrian. I was thinking about this in the morning.
Yeah.
And while autopilot's really good at sort of routine checking or adjusting, you still need a skilled person to put in the destination. You still need somebody who's been in those conditions before, and they know that in this condition before, I know that I work the aircraft in this way, and the context that I've got is this. So I think that human judgment is super important, and the people who actually think are now the ones where I think they'll probably come to the fore. And AI does get things wrong.
Yeah.
Which is why people actually, the ability to think is really, really important. So I think for myself, I'd say it's definitely sharpened me up, because it allows me to have that time to actually solve the right problems. Whereas some of the other problems that weren't as important, I can probably pair more with AI, get to 70% and say that's probably enough. But then there's some aspects that I want to get to 100% that I give AI a start, it gives me the 20% and I do the 80%. So I think that's the model that we're now moving towards, that if you're probably not using AI, you'll start to fall behind.
Yeah, definitely. Even now more so. I know when it first came on the scene, people were saying, look, if you're not using it now, you're falling behind. But it's definitely a situation now, isn't it?
Correct.
So the people that have been able to challenge, think outside the box, they're the ones that are going to have longevity with AI.
Correct.
Yeah. Perfect. Final question, Dileep, my friend. What is one takeaway, one message that you want tech leaders to take away from the podcast?
I think for me, it's don't treat AI as just a tool that you roll out and you get a silver bullet and everything's perfect. I think for me, it very much comes from, it's like a well-maintained engine in a team. You've got to look after it. You have to tune it. You have to learn. You might have different road conditions and you have to tune it differently. I think you have to put in as much as you want out. And I think that's an important mindset that I want to leave with people, that if you get to a point that you're just copy and pasting and you're not thinking, how are you actually improving yourself? Because if anything, you're actually de-skilling yourself.
Yeah.
And that's probably what I want to leave with people, Adrian.
Perfect. I like the de-skilling piece, yeah, because it's not there to numb your thought process, is it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's there to complement. It's there to actually take a small set of thought and actually make it bigger to actually get to a better solution.
Yeah. So I suppose don't be lazy with the use of AI.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
Perfect. Dileep, that's been brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to have you on the podcast again. And thank you very much for your insights into a key topic to a lot of people, which is AI in today's world. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me again, Adrian. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thanks again.
No problem at all, mate.